He is risen. He is risen indeed. Good morning. Now, someone once said that only what's dying for is what really is worth living for. And in these next few moments, I'd like to share about this most amazing love for which Christ died. You know, love is an interesting thing because it can actually make you go crazy. And for those who have been madly in love, you know what I mean. You know, some of you don't know know me as a reserved, quiet, shy kind of guy. There's some chuckles here. I guess they don't believe what I'm saying. But it wasn't always that way. There was a time when I was wild and I was crazy. And it was the time I was trying to woo my wife, Gail, to marry me. I would do anything for her, and I did anything for her. I even took up jogging. I even ate raw vegetables. And for some of you who understand the Japanese culture, I even tried eating natto. And it's brutal, but I would do it because my wife loves natto. My wife loves vegetables. My wife loves to jog. And now she's convinced me, because she and I actually now are both vegetarians, but I also eat meat. You know. I gave her everything. And when I first met her, I knew I was in love. But I was a poor graduate student. I mean subterranean poor graduate student. I had a monthly stipend that was more than sufficient as long, months didn't have 3 weeks. So Gail would kindly bring meals for the last week of my month because she saw something special. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was my look. Well, okay, it wasn't my looks, but as I said, I was like really poor, and some of my friends, some of my rich friends, as I was in graduate school, would be able to dream of and would take their girlfriends to Europe, maybe to Holland. And all I could wish for was just going on a Dutch treat. But I was so poor, I could afford to only pay for on date nights was my attention. Yeah, it was tough, and some we don't get them, but that's okay. But I was trying to convince her why I was a once-in-a-lifetime catch for any pretty missionary school teacher. She thought I was funny. Nobody else did, so she married me out of pity, I think. But the rest is history. I'm so blessed to have her as my wife. Well, let me tell you of another love story, a truly amazing, different love story. Today we celebrate Resurrection Sunday. And I want to talk about the man who had so generated love, compassion, that he died for us. But I want to describe to you this man, what he was before that got the disciples, that got those who came into his presence, a sense that they wanted to follow him. But he had to die so that we could follow him too. Now it's in the book of all places, in the 7th chapter of Luke, and I got some verses for you there in the handout. But I want to preface those verses by the verse before, in verse 36 of Luke chapter 7. And it goes like this. Now one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him. So he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. When a woman who had a sinful life in that town learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster jar of perfume. And as she stood behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. Imagine, if you will, the scene is set. The Pharisees are having a party. Now, they were the top dogs in the town, the who's who of the town. And imagine, if you will, the architecture at that time, in which they probably were having dinner out in the courtyard. But the courtyard was accessible for many on the outside who were not invited to take a look at who was there, who wasn't there. And it was at that time that one of the Pharisees, the head Pharisee at that time probably, or at least somebody close to him, said, you know what, man, we better invite Jesus. And we get that by how he was greeted, if you were to read some of the 7th chapter there of Luke. So he was kind of like, oh man, we look really bad, so let's just have him come. Being more obligated to invite him than desiring his presence there. And at that time, so they were having dinner and laughing and telling some good Pharisee jokes. Out of nowhere came this deeply troubled, notorious woman. We wouldn't be too far off if we were to look in the passages to guess that she was a successful woman of the night. And she would clearly never have been invited to their homes, at least not publicly. You could imagine all the outsiders there just sort of looking over each other, and how she had to fight her way through them to get to the entrance and there stand at the feet of Jesus. Now again, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch of the passages to say that she had heard of Jesus. She had heard of this man, and more than likely, she had been around him. And there was something different about him. And she knew when she heard that there was going to be a party, and somebody may have whispered to her wherever she was working that Jesus was at the Pharisee's house. And she just knew she had to be by him again.